So you have an idea in your mind, a story to be told, and if you don't get it out, you just might explode, but you don't know where to start. Well, you've come to the right place. Having the idea to come up with a story is actually a really good thing. Sometimes you have ideas just flooding in so fast. It's like trying to take a sip from a fire hose. There's like so many ideas coming in, and it's your job to kind of navigate that and to organize them and to plan it out and to take the information that's flowing through your head and put it into some sort of format where others can digest it and consume it. So if you want to write a novel, I think the first thing you need to do is to create an outline or create some sort of plan to organize your thoughts. I've been a writer for over 10 years and I've written, a dozen books or so. So I kind of know some of the tricks. I know what works and what doesn't work. You don't have to write a plan. There are books that I've just sat at the computer with an idea and just started typing. That does work too, but I've also done it with a plan and it just works way better. It's way easier to kind of manage your thoughts and to organize and to maintain a schedule. So I'll go over some of the things that I do with my planning, and hopefully some of it resonates with you. You might have your own techniques that you kind of develop or you already do. So this is just, to let you know what I do and see if it can be of use to you. So like I said, it's not necessary that you come up with a plan before you write your story. Like outlining is not actually necessary. You can do it without, but it isn't advised. So if you don't come up with a plan or an outline before you start writing, what tends to happen to a lot of writers, even seasoned writers, is they get writer's block, this frustration, this inability to kind of move forward. And I think, maybe there's some other reasons, but one of the main reasons for me, in my experience, is answering that dreaded question, what happens next? You have a bunch of enthusiasm and you're excited to write the story, sit down at your computer and you furiously start typing it out. But then what happens is when you get, 6, 8, 10 chapters in, you stop and you go, I don't know where this story goes because you haven't done the work prior to kind of set you up for success, right? Before you hit that wall, it's better to have some sort of idea to navigate. It's almost like following a string through a maze. You've already kind of gone over the story in your head or on paper, and this might take months. And this is maybe kind of one of the agonizing things for a lot of new writers because, they're filled with enthusiasm. They just want to get started and start writing, but they might not be setting themselves up for success, right? So what I would do, or what I'd advise, is to kind of pre-navigate those waters. So like maybe like a rock climber is a good example. They scout out the location first before they, okay, that's not a good example because I'm not a rock climber, but let's go with the maze. We talked about the maze. So you do the maze once, and then the next time you go through it, you can just follow your path. Let's say that. So it makes the next time you do it that much easier. So another thing is that if you don't outline, you end up wasting a lot of time. So while your novel may eventually get done, it might not be the most efficient way to write because you're sitting over, mulling over choices, your brain starts to wander, you lose focus. Next thing you know, you're on Amazon or you're on Facebook. In order to kind of maintain that focus and maintain that momentum, so when you sit at your computer, you're, highly focused, firing on all cylinders, and you produce the best work for that day. If you have a number of those days, then your novel, you can eventually, I usually write a novel in about 6 to 8 weeks. And I feel like this is pretty good. Maybe some people take longer or some people do it shorter, but I'm pretty happy with completing a novel in about a month and a half, maybe 2 months. And I also work full time, so I'm not, fully dedicated to this. But the last thing you want to do is have something drag on for 2 years, 3 years, and everyone, it's kind of like that Family Guy episode. It's like, oh, you're still writing that novel? You've been talking about that 3 years ago. So
got a nice little story you're working on there, a big novel you've been working on for 3 years. Yeah? Got a compelling protagonist. Yeah? A little story brewing there, working on that for quite some time, huh? Yeah, talking about that 3 years ago. Yeah, been working on that the whole time.
So that can sometimes happen, right? And you lose the kind of momentum. You have other ideas or other projects and you kind of just give up, and that's never a good thing. Lastly, I will say that creating art, essentially, you're writing a novel, is creating art. It's a very fun thing to do. But if you don't set yourself up for success, and then you quit at it, then you think you suck and you maybe abandon it altogether. It's not that you suck, it's that you maybe failed to do the proper preparation. So, I love metaphors, maybe like running a marathon. You just show up one day with some new shoes and you start running, but you haven't dieted, you haven't trained, and you get about 2 miles in and you quit. You never want to quit at creating art, because that's kind of, you're an artist. If you're thinking about writing a novel, you're an artist and you're a creative. So a lot of writers have different styles of how they plan their novels. Sometimes they meticulously plan out every detail. They pretty much write the novel before they write the novel. Others, go over little cue cards or little pieces of paper, and they'll write it out manually and kind of arrange it on the floor, on the wall, almost like a puzzle. There is software that does this. I think Scrivener is one that kind of organizes your thoughts and ideas. So I'll go over my kind of plan and show you what works for me, and hopefully some of it resonates with you and you can learn something. My style of planning entails 4 things: notes, character profiles, outlines, and storyboarding. So I'll go through what each of those mean and why each of them is important. So I assume you've already come up with an idea for a novel, and what I like to do when I come up with an idea is, spend months, maybe 2, 6, a year, whatever. And in those kind of preceding months, or the time before I sit down and write, I'm thinking about the novel. This is kind of like the notes stage. So anything that I can think of, maybe it's a character name or a plot or the ending or a piece of dialogue or an idea for a scene, anything I can think of. Doesn't have to be, a good idea, just any idea that I think would, fit this story. I become kind of immersed, and my brain is kind of hyper-focused on this story. So I'm constantly thinking about it, whether I'm walking the dog or doing dishes or, in the moments before I'm sleeping, whatever. I'm constantly just thinking about the story and taking detailed notes. And I usually capture those ideas on my phone, and I email them to myself, or if I'm at work, or I write it down. So when I have all the notes, I store them on one file on my computer. So the title of the book and then notes. So let's just say The Art of the Hustle notes. So that'll be one Word document. I'll have another Word document that's just called The Art of the Hustle, which will be where my actual story goes. And then I'll have another one that's my outline, and then I might have another Word document that is just like my ideas. So the notes document is where I kind of chuck all my ideas. I email these ideas to myself, copy and paste it into this one Word document. Then I start to slowly organize them into a 5 or a 3-act structure. So 3-act is very common. This is like a classic Simpsons episode. There's a setup, a conflict, and then a resolution. A 5-act is very similar, but it just has a few more kind of beats that it breaks down. I usually like to do a 5-act because it's a little bit more detail for me. So the 5-act structure is a little bit more detailed, and that's the one I like to work with. And so the first kind of act is an introduction to the character. We learn about some of their wants. It doesn't have to be an info dump. We don't have to tell everything, but just something related to the character. They're ignorant of their duty. So, usually in my stories, it's about somebody finding their greater purpose. So that's just something that interests me. So I usually have somebody who's, either poor or an orphan, or they are insignificant in some way. And then through the kind of story, they become, their lives become more purpose-filled and more significant. We talk about a little bit about their relationships and what their current situation is. Are they dating anyone? Are they living with their parents? Are they single? Are they living alone? Like, who is this character? What do they want? What is their desire? So that's kind of Act 1. Act 2, I have some inciting incident. So something to kind of propel the story and to hook the reader, let them know, what is the adventure going to be? Some call to action, some call to adventure. We might even introduce the bad guy, or maybe plant seeds of, what is it that this person's trying to overcome? They're ignorant to their duty and they refuse the call. So somebody, might say, you alone must stop them. And then the person's like, me, like, what do I do? What can I do? Like maybe like Neo in the Matrix. He's like, I'm not the one. I can't be the one. I'm just a dude. So that's kind of the thing. And then he eventually becomes Neo. The third act is about meeting the mentors, discovering a new crucial piece of information. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more about the enemy and, the allies that this person's gathering, and, kind of really flesh out the conflict. Maybe there's a big fight looming, so I kind of plant seeds of that. and they cross some threshold. So there's an arc to their kind of the plot and their personal development. So the fourth act, things are kind of heating up in the story. The tension's building, the conflict is building. This person is tested. The character is really challenged in ways where it would kind of grow their personality. So maybe skills that they didn't once have, now they are starting to kind of realize their full potential. It's really important in storytelling to create like conflict and tension, and one of the ways you can do that is to have your character fail before they succeed. Before the kind of climax. The Act 4 is really like the climax where the action is really ramped up to a 10. And maybe they don't succeed at first, or several times, or at all. So the fourth act is really where I flesh out those ideas, and then it leads to the fifth act. The fifth act is like the journey home, the triumph. They overthrow the bad guy. They, learn some new piece of information that inspires them and makes them feel like, what, I am this person, I am the chosen one, or whatever the case may be. And then you have to, wrap it up and, have some sort of satisfying conclusion. And so that's kind of the 5-act structure that I use. And so if you're interested in that, email me at edward@edwardmullen.com and I'll send you a copy. It's a Word document that you can just plug in, use this kind of outline to plug in your own details. And again, you don't have to, follow it to a T, but generally this is a good guide to go by. Okay, so you have all your notes, and then you might want to start organizing them and creating an outline. That is a logical step, and sometimes I do that. But a step before that is character profiles. And the reason I put this in between notes, so notes, character profiles, then outline, then storyboarding, is because having a clear idea of who's in your story, their kind of motivations, their wants, desires, their strengths, their weaknesses, really understanding and fleshing those characters out will actually help inform how the story develops and takes off. So there's two ways that I like to do this. The first involves thinking of some character in my head and then try to find an image online that matches that person. So let's say I'm thinking about some, business guy. I might pick Adam Levine and put a picture of Adam Levine. Doesn't have to be famous, but whatever. And then give him a name and give him some attributes. What are his wants or desires, his hobbies, his interests? Where's he from? A little bit of his background, some quotables. Like, what are some of the things? How does he talk? What are some of the things that he says? And then I like to take that information and write a little short bio in kind of a longer form prose. And I'll do this for all my main characters. It might be, I'll do anywhere between 3 to 8 or whatever. I don't generally get too crazy with so many characters in my books, but, you might have, 20 or whatever. You don't have to do this for all of them. Just kind of the main characters to really flesh them out. So that's one way. The second way is to just draw. If you're good at drawing, just draw the characters in your head. So this is what I've been doing lately instead of finding an image, because that kind of takes a while. I just quickly sketch out what they look like, their body shape, their gender, their hairstyle, and then I go through the same thing as I mentioned earlier. So their wants, desires, their age, their education, how they talk, quotables, all that kind of stuff. When you have this on paper, it is really, really helpful for planning, because then you start figuring out who says what, whose strengths and weaknesses can get involved in the story. I like to involve everybody's in the story somehow. So how does this person's strengths contribute to the story, or this person's weakness contribute to the story? And then how does it all tie together? It's very complicated. It's almost like, basket weaving. I don't know if basket weaving is complicated, but you're basically stitching together, let's say 8 different people through a 5-act structure. It's not easy to do that. And so that's why, another good reason why planning is so important, so you can kind of sort out, have a rough idea of who does what. So that's why I do character profiles. You have your notes and you have your character profiles. You're getting very eager to write. The next thing I would do is start organizing those notes. And to do this, I use headings in Word. So I do like H1 heading, we'll type good ideas, bad ideas, and good ideas, but not right for this story. So I kind of break it down. So there might be a scene that is interesting, but maybe doesn't fit the story. As you start to kind of build out the notes, you'll kind of get a better understanding of what the story is. And this stage, I should mention, is you telling yourself the story. I mean, unless it's something that you know very well, like a situation that actually happened to you, a lot of the times, let's say I have some idea for, let's say Prodigy, one of my books, futuristic tale. It's about a female protagonist. She's young, she's smart. I need to know what happens. I don't know what happens until I write it. So these notes really kind of provide scaffolding or some sort of structure for me to hang future ideas on. So then I begin to, I can either use a highlighter and I go through and I highlight, color coordinate, these are good ideas. And at the end, then I start separating them. That's a very efficient method. Or if one is a really bad idea, I maybe just, I never delete ideas, but I just move it to the bad idea. And then I start it starts to take shape. I start to organize my thoughts. And then I start plugging in, okay, well, this is more of an act 1 thing. This is more an act 4 thing. This is definitely the ending. This is somewhere in the middle. And I start slowly kind of shaping and manipulating this outline. With your outline, there's no rule for how much detail or lack of detail it needs to be. So you can, as much as you need to fill in to kind of get going and keep that momentum going, that's what I'd recommend. So, and the notes stage never stops. I'm constantly taking notes because there's a lot of times my mind is working when I'm not actually writing. So when I'm writing, that's not necessarily when I'm coming up with ideas. I do that when I'm at work, when I'm on the bus, when I'm walking my dog, when I'm washing dishes, cooking dinner. I'm thinking those are the times when I'm actually working. And then when I sit down to write it, hopefully all that work has been done and it's just a matter of getting it out of my head and typing it out, or getting it from the outline and typing it out in a longer form. The last step that I like to do before I actually start writing is called storyboarding. And you might be familiar with this term because this is what film directors do. They kind of plan out their shots. So they figure out a planning schedule. So today we're going to be on this location with these actors, and this is the kind of page or 2 pages of script that we're going to be filming. That script is like the outline. The storyboard is, okay, what shots do we need? So you don't want to figure out on the location where you're going to put your camera and what shots. You want to do that ahead of time. So you draw little pieces of paper, little squares, and then you show, maybe a camera panning around somebody's face, or top down, or how about they like run up some stairs and then the shot is, whatever. Like you plan out the shots. This is the same thing what I do, except I don't draw it out. I just maybe plan out in a little bit more detail. So I do 9 squares on a piece of paper, just like a notepad. In my outline, it might just say, as an inciting incident, gets beat up at school. But in my storyboard, it might have a little more detail about, what happened. So, friend is in PE class, gets hit with dodgeball. Main character defends friend. Bully and main character get into fight, sent to the principal's office. So then I kind of know the beats. I go, okay, the end of this little chunk, this little scene is they end up in the principal's office. There's going to be a fight, and there's going to be some, inciting incident, like a dodgeball hits him in the face. So then, okay, I can write that scene. It gives me a little bit more kind of structure, so I can kind of sit down and write and figure out what I need to do for that day. And this is another great example or great way to keep yourself motivated. So when you sit down, you just look at this piece of paper and you go, okay, what do I need to do? And these are essentially scenes. Okay, scene 1, kid gets beat up at school. Scene 2, parents come pick them up and yell at them. Scene 3, maybe they're upset in their room and they run away from home, or whatever. Let's just say that's this. So I'm breaking it down into different scenes, and it's a very digestible, easy thing for me to sit down and accomplish. And usually there's no rule, but usually I try to aim for around 1,000 to 1,200, maybe 1,500 words per chapter. And in those, if you read my books, it's usually small scenes, like one fully contained scene after another. Not always, but I generally like to write in complete scenes. But that's just me. Okay, so you have your notes, you have your character profiles, you have your outline, and you have your storyboard. The next thing for you to do is to start writing. And I do have techniques for actually getting into writing and organizing your page. but that will be for the next video. Okay, so that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you like watching more videos like this where I talk about writing, please hit the subscribe button, and I will see you next time.